This is Professor Hazera, and this is the last video of the semester, I believe, and this is just to finish the explaining how I'm doing how I'm building, because it's an ongoing process for the next few weeks. The Moderna financial forecast and valuation, especially with respect to research and development. Um, and let's get right into it. Okay, so in the first video, I just went over the unique aspects of Moderna. And it's a company we all know that came out with a vaccine that's going to have super sales this year and maybe flatter sales next year. But so for the quarter ended March 2021, you're going from negative 35 last year cents to $3.21. For the quarter June 2021, you're going from negative 31 cents to $5.35. For the current year, you're going from a loss last year of $2 more or less to an average estimate of $22 more or less. So it's tenfold, more than tenfold. And then finally, for the year end of 2022, you're going from $21.85, which is probably incredibly high, to something which is high, but still not as high, $14.80. So you've got the classic biotech, yes, that you've got uh, initially very little revenue and a lot of R&D creates negative earnings per share. Then we come in and they have a blockbuster drug, and this is all compressed because of the pandemic, and they're going to have huge revenue, which makes them go from negative a loss of $2 to $22 in per share in earnings per share for the year. And the next year it flattens out a little bit because revenue went down a little bit. Excuse me. Okay, so we're going to go down here. And then this is the same. You'll see the same patterns in the revenue. For the revenue, but this is really what's going to drive their earnings per share. The top line is going to drive the bottom line. And I just want to see, so the earnings per share are estimated at between this year at the average is 21, and they're between, look at the variance, 11 and 29. You might as well just roll it dice to see, to get the valuation. Okay, so here's what we got here for the revenue. The year ago sales were 8.8 million, 8.4 million more or less. This year they will be 2.41, so that's 3 times, I guess. Then last year 66 for last quarter, for the quarter in June 2021. Last year it was 66 million. Now it's going to be 4.23 billion. But here's the real one. For last year, all of last year, they didn't even make $1 billion. They made $802 million, and they're going to have the average analyst says they're going to have $16 billion in revenue. But also, so I'm going to use that number as my top line for the income statement, and I'm actually going to use the earnings per share estimate, the average earnings per share estimate of 21.85 is my bottom line. But keep in mind that people are just, look at that. 11 is the low estimate, the high estimate is near 30. So I mean, people are going all over the place on this thing. So and it's all driven by the revenue. What's going to happen to the vaccine? Okay, so let's go ahead and go over to the worksheet here, and I'll put a copy. I'm going to paste a copy of the worksheet. And I went over it in class, but I know it was very fast, so that's why I'm making this video and going through it. Okay, so what I've done is, that we can't use a straight linear model, saying this everything's going to increase at some percentage of sales, because we know that that R&D is fluctuating, the cost of goods sold is fluctuating, and more than anything else, sales is fluctuating. So you've got this huge sort of up and down. So for important items, for 3, 4, 5 items, especially let's say 3, I've got growth percentages by year, and this will enable me and anyone to at least change the growth by year, super growth period. Okay, so in the first year, I'm taking this from the analyst estimates. The analysts, we're just estimating 16 billion, as you can see. Last year, the company earned 803, so that was a 20-fold growth rate, and I'm going to go with that. Okay, and I'm assuming cost of sales is 5%, and I just went up 5% each year. At this point, I'm just guessing at this. Now, research and development, I'm guessing is initially 5%. It goes up to 25% by the end of the year. I'm using what I'm using there is just the logic. Number one, a lot of um, established biotechs and pharmaceutical companies, they average between 20 and 35% capital expenditures, so I 25%. And by 20, 5 years from now, this company should be fairly established if they've had success. The thing is R&D expenditures are going to go up for this company because they've developed this drug. They're going to have to find, in order to remain competitive, they're going to have to find new uses for this technology, other vaccines, possibly for the coronavirus as the new variants come out, but also for possibly other diseases. And actually, they're doing that. I think they're going to. I mean, they're doing a pretty good job on it. Okay, so here's how I'm going to assume in this example that a portion of R&D is expensed. First of all, I'm assuming that, and we'll do this right now, that R&D expenditures, and R&D expenditures are both capital and expenses. So this is the total amount that the company is going to spend on R&D. That's why I'm calling it expenditures. And part of it's going to be capitalized. So I'm assuming across the board that 15% of that number is going to be capitalized, and that the difference, that 85% is going to be expense. Now that's a total guess. I'm just setting this model up, and then you can go in and tweak it a little bit, and given, make different assumptions about their capitalization rate, all that. I'm using an R&D amortization rate of 4%. Now the R&D expenditures, these are the total R&D expenditures for each of these years, and basically this is going to be as a percentage of sales. Okay, so where I'm getting that number there is I'm assuming that your R&D expenditures for 2021 are going to be 5% of sales, and I'm assuming it's going to be 10% because they are going to be spending greater. Their sales revenue is going to go down, their R&D is going to go up, so they will be, as a percentage of sales, R&D is going to go up, no question in my mind. So 10% this year, and then this year is 15%. But anyway, so this is their total R&D expenditures. These can be capitalized or expensed, and I'm assuming, just have a starting number, basically, 15% will be capitalized. That means that 85% is failure rate. Okay. So, and I've transferred those numbers down to here. Okay, so what I'm looking at here is we've got expenditures of 803,395 for the first year. 15% is my capitalization rate, will be capitalized as an asset, and 85% will be expensed. Okay, so here's my R&D expense. I've got these numbers in red here. Here's my R&D expense here. Okay, and so that number there is just F13 times 1 minus the capitalization rate, so it's 85%. Okay, and I'm using the same formula across the board. It's going up and down. It initially goes up, flat, and then flattens just a little bit because sales go up dramatically, and then the sales kind of flatten. I'm still thinking this last year may be a little bit too high. You're looking, yeah, a little too far in the future here, I think. Okay, so anyway, so we've got that's your R&D expenses, which are based on 85% of your R&D expenditures. Okay, and so the 15% will go on of that will go on as an R&D asset. So down here I've got an R&D net asset, and let's see if we can do this. The R&D net asset is the portion of R&D expenditures which are capitalized, and I'm just assuming it's 15%. It's got to be a relatively low number because they say 10% of drugs ultimately get approved. So maybe I'm going with that number. There's other aspects to that too, though. So there's a lot to think about. You saw the variety of valuations. So anyway, so those are my R&D assets versus the R&D expense here, right here. Okay, so I'm going to be capitalizing. I'm going to go down. You've got the balance sheet. A lot of these are regular things. And I'm holding a lot of things constant here too, because to start off with a simple model. Notice I'm holding all these long-term liabilities constant. Okay, and you'll see also that my balance sheet balances. I've got two schedules here. I've got one schedule of fixed assets, got one schedule of fixed assets here, and that's the usual schedule of fixed assets made the way you've been making it. And I got all these from, you'll see that they're from one of the sheets, property, plant, equipment details, that type of thing. And they're all from that sheet. It's out to the right somewhere. And the depreciation rate is just the depreciation expense divided by gross assets should be. We'll be making corrections to this. Divide by E82. Depreciation rate is E82. That looks perfect. That looks just fine. Okay, and so the net amount, as usual, comes from, I gotta do this. This comes from the net assets on the balance sheet, and then we add accumulated depreciation, which is just last time's depreciation times 1 plus the depreciation rate, and the difference is going to be the depreciation expense, and the purchase of property, plant, equipment is going to be the difference in gross assets. Okay, so that's my asset schedule there. And then I come down here, and I'm going to have a sort of theoretical here at this point. A lot of theory is driving a lot of this. Is I've got a schedule of R&D. Okay, and this is the part of R&D that I initially. This is all the R&D that was capitalized. So as it's capitalized, I add it up, and then it's going to be amortized. I'm using a 4% amortization rate. I don't know why I chose it. I'm thinking of a 20 or 25-year patent, basically, something along those lines. Okay, so I'm using that amortization rate right there. Okay, so I've got two tables which are similar: the schedule of fixed assets, the schedule for R&D. Now, the fixed free cash flow. Remember, the definition of free cash flow is the basic income, cash basis income. I'm not doing working capital here. I'll add that somewhat fancier sheet. Okay, so I start with net income, and I'm going to add back depreciation, amortization expense because those are non-cash expenses, and then I'm going to subtract out the investments, so to speak, that the company needs to the investments the company needs in order to grow. Well, they need to purchase property, plant, equipment. I believe that Moderna has they have contractors, but also they have their own factories, I believe. But it's not their big investment. Compare that to their total R&D expenditures. I'm going to subtract the total R&D expenditures, including the expenses, because in order for a company like this to survive, it seems to me that in order to grow, they're going to have to probably invest in 9 unsuccessful projects in order to have one successful project, which is going to have to fund a lot of this. Now, I don't know what the rate is, but you do hear things like only 10% of projects come up. Okay, so there's my free cash flows right there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm not even worried about, I'll use the cost of capital here. And I think I used the super growth cost of capital 10%. But the main thing is I want you to realize, and this is how we do the test, is I'm going to get my cash flows, not from a growth rate, but directly from the investments and cash flows that came out of the balance sheet income statement. And in future versions, I'm going to make adjustments for working capital, all that. Okay, and then so I'm not using, these are not going up by linear growth rate. These are going up by the actual amounts I got. And one of the reasons that a simple model like just a short form model doesn't work too well, it can work for a quick calculation, it wouldn't work over the long one, is because if you have nonlinear items in like goodwill, let's say you have, let's say 30% of your assets to goodwill, and you're assuming that it's not going to be impaired, and you don't know about their about future acquisitions, and if you keep it constant, there's not going to be a linear relationship between your revenue and your net income. Okay, so count it back 10%, I guess, and I got a value of $244.44. What I'm going to do is I'm going to upload the video here because you're going to have to watch it a couple times, I think at least, but also upload the sheet, and there will be a similar. So I'm going to basically ask you to do a similar valuation for Moderna. Give you a couple of weeks for this, and by the way, so you've got these two short videos, and they should help you out as well as this. I would, if you find places where you can improve this, email me, because this is like, I just finished this. I'm working on this about 5 minutes per day over a few days, and I just pick it up every morning and do something a little bit with it. But it's starting to build. It's an ongoing project. But I once again go back to, just before and up here, is um, if you look at the range of earnings per share estimates, the revenue. I mean, if you just look at revenue for next year, that's in the order of, you know, over. If you take the low estimate, the high estimate, over doubling, more than doubling that. If you look at the earnings per share estimates, the average is 21, but you've got one at 11 and the low one at 11 and the high one at 29. So this is really a crapshoot. Excuse me. So there's a lot of um, unsystematic risk in the stock. It's a stock you could use to diversify a lot. Their beta wouldn't have a big high R square. Anyway, so I will put these up and I'll wait for your responses. Thank you very much. Bye.